Well, welcome everybody. It is now 12 o'clock. I'm going to crack on. We've still got people joining. There's a little bit of housekeeping you have to do before you get started. So welcome everybody. And today we're talking about the power of influence using the key tools of persuasion to make your marketing fly. I am Vanessa Lanham-Day. I describe myself as a marketing inspirer, mentor and coach, and everything I do is about inspiring and empowering you to fulfill your marketing potential, and I really hope that we're going to do some of that today. It's an incredible book. Some of you I know will have read it, but for those who haven't, it may be an idea that you do, but I'm hoping obviously your content I'm going to give you today maybe you don't need to. Just take all the good bits out and use it for your marketing. So this is how Robert Cialdini in fact, describes his book, using the power of influence, using the key tools of persuasion. Persuasion is very, very important in the art of marketing. You need to get people to do things, don't you? You need to get them to buy, make decisions. You're trying to control their behaviour in some way. And this book is all about that. Now, the guy himself is a behavioural psychologist, an experimental behavioural psychologist. He's not a marketer. So the outcomes in his book are not specially directed at marketing, although he does talk quite a lot about selling and so forth, but he doesn't necessarily draw conclusions about marketing, and that's what I'm really going to hope to give you today. As we go along, some of you are tweeters, so if you want to tweet about what we're doing or any messages you've got from it, please do. It's at Vanessa Lanham. You'll also find our page on Facebook, On Track Marketing, if you just put that in the search, and you will find it. It's really good to get some conversations going as a result of today. I'm joined here today, as usual, many of you will know Spencer Cummins. Hello there, Spencer.
Hello, Vanessa. Hello, everybody.
Right, Spencer today is in charge of the knobs and dials, and anybody who's ever run a webinar knows you need a Spencer in charge of the knobs and dials, because there's quite a lot that goes on, not least of which we will be taking questions and stuff later on. If anybody's got comments as you go along, please do put them in, and Spencer will feed them to me, and we'll try and pick up stuff as we go along. So a little bit of housekeeping. Switch on the recording, that's a note to me, so that we make sure this gets recorded. Everybody that attends and those who don't get on the call will in fact get a copy of the recording afterwards. We're going to be running a couple of polls. Many of you I know will have involved with these before. There's 5 choices. We just ask you to click a few things, and we get a little bit of feedback from you, so do help us out when we run those. There is a survey on the exit just to ask you what you thought of it and whether you'd come again, so it's always useful feedback to get. Obviously the sound for everybody is muted. We're not going to be taking live questions, so the only sound we've got is me, so otherwise it all just becomes a little bit noisy, because in fact we do have a full house today. This is the most popular webinar we have ever put in, so we fully expect every seat to be taken. We're almost there in fact now. As I said earlier, you can ask questions as you go along. You will find it. Let me show you. You've got this little bar on your desktop, the little orange blob at the top. If you click on that, it'll enlarge it or shrink it, and on there are chat. There's a chat box, so if you've got any questions you'd like to ask, please pop them in there, and Spencer will raise them as we go along. There we are, there's the chat box there. So without further ado, let's start to talk then about influence. Like I say, Cialdini's book, all about getting people to do the things you want to do, to change their behaviour. And just, you're all marketers. You're on the call today because, we're talking about marketing, and you really, really do need to understand this stuff, and not in a glib, superficial way. You need to get under the skin of it and really understand how this stuff can make a big impact on the materials you're sending out, because if you do it in a superficial way, that's the kind of results you're going to get. If you observe the really clever marketers, it's so clear that they understand this stuff, and they've taken time to be thoughtful, to say, how can I apply that stuff, or how can I be really clever to get the reactions I want. It's not just a quick fix of trying a few easy things. It's about getting really under the skin. There's kind of some bad news though to start off with, is I'm actually not going to tell you anything that you don't already know. There are no great revelations in here. You're not going to go, well, I'd never thought of that. Most of this stuff you're going to have heard before, but the good news is I bet you didn't realise just how powerful this stuff is. And that's the joy of the book. Because the guy's a behavioural experimental psychologist, he's got masses of experimentation of human behaviour to show the extraordinary things people will do when put in the right circumstances. And that's what makes this book really great. So I really do want you to implement this stuff and say not be superficial. So I asked myself the question, how can I make that masses more likely that you were going to do that? And I've decided what I'm going to do, there's a small gift for people who stay on the webinar today. I'm not going to reveal it until close to the end, so you are going to have to listen to the end. So I hope that's a nice incentive for you to hang on and see the stuff we've got to say, because let's say there's something really helpful for you at the end. So let's crack on then without further ado. Cialdini talks about the click-whir. This is all about click-whir behaviour. What does he mean by click-whir behaviour? Well, in his introduction he uses two very interesting examples, one of which a friend of his had a jewellery store based over in Arizona. The guy's an American, so she in turquoise jewellery and other jewellery, very popular in the sort of American Indian areas. And she had a stall and a shop based up in Arizona, and she had a whole range of turquoise jewellery that simply wasn't selling, and it'd been sticking around for ages, and she wanted to get rid of it. So she was going away for a few days, so she left an instruction with her staff to sell it for half price, and that way she could be rid of a lot. Well, she came back from her holiday a few days later, and all the jewellery had disappeared. So she was thrilled with that. She spoke to the staff, asked them how it had gone, and it became clear that they had misunderstood what she had said, and instead of halving the price, they had doubled the price, and yet all the jewellery had gone. And there's only one conclusion you can really draw from that, is that there's that age-old thing that we all understand: expensive equals good, ergo click-whir. I'm going to buy it, it must be a good thing. Classic click-whir behaviour. Another really interesting one, and most of you here are going to really recognise this. I'm famous for my patience. Spencer, am I good at being patient?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Me in a queue. Goodness me. He did this experiment. It was done in a library. There was people queuing up to use the photocopier, and the experimenter, and they did it multiple times, it wasn't just once or twice, they did several experiments, and somebody went to the front of the queue and asked to push in. Now, I don't know how you feel about that. Personally, I'd poke them in the eye, but let's see what happens. So for their first test, they went up and they said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the copier?" And in 60% of the cases, people allowed them to push in. I personally wouldn't have done, but 60% of the people did. In version 2 of the experiment, they had this variation, which was, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages. May I use the copier because I'm in a rush?" So now they'd given a reason. They'd made it clear that they were anxious and they needed to get this stuff done. And in that case, 94%, nearly everybody, allowed them to push in. And I think that seems like reasonable human behaviour. Still a bit annoying, but hey, the guy's in a rush, what have you. However, what's really interesting is what happened in version 3. Because where they said, "Excuse me, I have 5 pages, may I use the copier because I've had to make some copies?" And the important thing here is, in this second half of the sentence, the bit beyond the "because," no additional information has been added. We know they want to use the copier because they've got copies. That's kind of the whole gist. They haven't added in any way a justifiable reason. However, 93% of people said yes. And the conclusions they drew was the very word "because" became the click-whir, because as soon as we hear "because," we are preconditioned to believe that there's an excuse coming, therefore it allows us to make this behaviour. And just very interesting.
Yeah, that sounds more, because they're giving a reason.
They're giving a reason, so we don't even listen to the bit that happens after "because," that the simple word "because" has created the behaviour.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely fascinating. Personally, I still don't think I would have done, but there you go.
Let's be honest, you'd be the one pushing in.
Would I? Okay, so as I say, Cialdini's 6 weapons of influence will help you be massively more persuasive in your marketing. So let's have a look. What are the 6 weapons that he talks about? So firstly, reciprocation, so essentially gifts, giving and receiving. Commitment and consistency, getting people to do things frequently. Social proof, testimonials and so forth, being liked. Having authority, scarcity, and that they all create this click-work behaviour. And we're going to talk about each of them in a lot more detail. But the important thing is the sense that we don't have a choice. It's hardwired into us. It's not that we're rationalising it, it's like an automatic response. And I think it's interesting to think about how has that come about. And if you think of how have we, as a society, how human beings developed over tens of thousands of years, we are a cooperative society. Part of our success as a species has been our ability to work cooperatively with one another. It's where you see all the sort of tribal movements from tens of thousands of years ago, where people had to start working together because food was scarce in some areas at some time of the year and so forth, and working together to create crops and what have you. And that's what's allowed us as a race to become successful. And so this kind of sense of cooperating has, those of us who are more successful at the click-were response have generally succeeded and survived. And that's why it's hardwired into us. So I think it's very interesting stuff. So I'm going to start off with a quick poll here. Poll number 1. Spencer, can you launch poll number 1 for us?
It is launched.
Some of you I know will be familiar with some of this material. So in the polls from here, you can only ask 5 different options. Unfortunately, we have 6 weapons. So I put the 5 that I think are the most likely that people may already be using. Click as many as are applicable for you. So if you think you're already using some of these ideas, just let us know. So it'd be interesting to see. So we've got a few people.
People are voting away.
Yeah, okay. Should we give them a 5, 4, 3, 2 and 1. So if you can close that for us, Spencer, and then reveal the results.
There you go.
So what have we got there? Okay, so reasonably even spread a lot across the board. Commitment and consistency out there as a leader. About 2/3 of you are saying that. Authority is doing well. Interestingly, reciprocation is the lowest of the 4, and that's the one we're going to start with in a moment. Yes, can we lose the results there? Thanks very much, Spencer. So reciprocation is the one we're actually going to spend most time in, because I genuinely think it's the one you're going to find easiest to implement. So let's crack on and talk about reciprocation. So essentially this sort of social concept that if you give me something, I have to give you something back. I feel obliged, even kind of whether I'm annoyed that you've given it to me, whether I even like you or not, I feel obliged to return the favour. And we're all familiar with this. I mean, how many times have you been invited out for dinner and then you have this sense, or round to somebody else's house, that you need to return the favour? They've had you across, you need to return the favour. You feel obliged. Even if you think they're the most boring people in the Parents Association, you feel obliged. How many of us have received a Christmas card from somebody we weren't expecting it from, and then we feel obliged to send them one back by return? It's, oh, God's sake, bloody auntie, I better send them a card, write one. We're quite irritated by it, but we do it. We feel obliged. We don't feel we have a choice. We all get the idea that there is, in fact, no such thing as a free lunch. That the business world has understood this for years, that you create a sense of obligation in people. It's really, really powerful. Now, the first example I'm going to show you of this takes us back to the 1960s. I'm beginning to give away my age here, but when I was a child, Daz has been around for donkey's years. But when I spoke about this in public recently, and I spoke about this case study, and nobody in the room remembered it except me, so I will explain. But when I was a child, and I guess marketing was in its early stages, America was leading a lot of this stuff, and so it was a little bit more crude. But the Daz example is often quoted in advertising circles as being incredibly powerful, because what they did with Daz is, if you bought a packet of Daz, that came with it was in fact a plastic daffodil strapped to the box. It's sellotaped on the box. Well, my mum, like just about everyone else's mum I knew, was so excited by this. It really didn't take long before we had a whole bunch of plastic daffodils sat in our kitchen, and they hung around our house for absolutely years. I mean, I don't know about you, I'm not that turned on by a plastic daffodil, but that whole sort of something for nothing mentality that people had made this incredibly powerful. And of course we see it you know, these cereal packets, you know, the little toys you put in, the cards that you used to get in packets of tea and so forth. And what's the reciprocation that we give back? Well, it's our brand loyalty, isn't it? That we feel we owe them something. Incredibly powerful. So this idea of a gift. Many of you may well have come across these guys, Amway, and it's the pyramid selling organisation, American organisation, where they sell direct in your homes, and they will come around and, you know, try to sell you cleaning products. Their sales exponentially, I mean, it was the big break in their business the moment they introduced this little beastie, which is called the Amway bug. You can't quite see it, it's a basket. So instead of just having the products for sale, they gave the candidate, the target, the prospect, call them what you may, the Amway bug, and it was a basket full of products which they were allowed freely to use. There was no cost attached. You would have them for a week or so, give them no obligation, try the things out and let us know what you think. Their sales went up exponentially because there's this sense, I've been given it, I feel obliged to buy something. Really powerful stuff.
And that's all on a really subconscious level.
Oh, absolutely. You don't sit there thinking, oh, well,
I better buy it.
Yeah, and I think anybody, I mean, we've all kind of had the whole Amway experience at some point, I'm sure. And actually, you're quite annoyed by it. Oh, God's sake, I don't really want to buy this blessed stuff, but I feel I have to. Yeah, even when we don't like it. Another really good example of this, the Hare Krishnas, again, exponentially, how their fundraising increased when they introduced the concept of a flower. And what they do is they just give you a flower. There's no obligation to give anything back. You know, they're not looking for anything. They just want to give you a flower. But of course, if you wanted to return the favour by making a donation, they would be grateful. And Cialdini speaks eloquently in the book about, you know, that they did experiments in airports where literally sort of businessmen sort of, you know, the Hare Krishna pops up in front of them, offers them the flower, they take it because they're a bit startled. They even actively try to give the wretched thing back, but, you know, they won't take it back. No, it's a gift. And the next thing you know, oh yes, okay, here's a couple of dollars. You know, and they're often seen rushing off, sticking the wretched flower in the bin. When they're grossly irritated by it, they still do it. It's powerful. This experiment was really fascinating, I think, that Cialdini explains in the book. Basically, that somebody, a research person, that, you know, a candidate was invited in in theory, to review, to critique some art. So they're sitting in a waiting room, and a chap called Joe pitches up and joins them. Now, Joe's obviously the researcher. In 50% of the cases, Joe leaves the waiting room, and he goes and buys a couple of bottles of Coke. I guess he goes to the toilet or something, and he comes back with 2 bottles of Coke, one for himself and one for the other person, and he gives it to them. In all cases, Joe subsequently offers some raffle tickets that he's selling and invites people to buy them. The other guy in the room, will he buy them? Now, interestingly, twice as many people bought the tickets that had been given the Coke as when they didn't get given the Coke. And what's interesting, the tickets were worth 2.5 times the value of the Coke, which adds up to a 500% return. So this idea of disproportionate return, that even though you know he's only spent, you know, under £1, you're perhaps giving £5 or whatever back in return, is disproportionate. This sense of being obliged. Incredibly powerful. It's hardwired, as I say. So I think there's lots of applications for this in marketing. So that's the question, how can I make that work in my marketing? Okay, well, kind of starting at the bottom and going up. Well, giving things like free ebooks and downloads, I mean, that's an easy thing to do, isn't it? I'm not sure that you're going to get massive obligation from that, but it's a good starting point, certainly if it's the nature of the relationship you continue to build on. Giving free advice and help. Now, I don't suggest you spend most of your life working for free, but it's a really good way of starting a relationship, isn't it? If you've met someone in networking and you perhaps offer to solve a problem for them that they've mentioned, you know, over breakfast, and you kind of, oh, I can sort that out for you. We're much more likely to want to do business with people who do that. People who, you know, giving free gifts with your marketing, all sorts of things, particularly thank you gifts or welcome gifts, a really, really powerful way of sort of creating this brand loyalty, this sense that I want to do business with you in the future, being really pleased and impressed. Free gifts with delivery. And it's just interesting. I'm a bit of a cupcake maker, as Spencer will tell you. We often get to sample them here. And there's a company I always buy all my cupcake things from. How related is it to? Every time they send me something, they put into it a small packet of Haribo. I'm a bit of a fan of Haribo, actually. And every time they send me something, there's always a packet of Haribo in there. And actually, I wouldn't ever go anywhere else. I think it's a really sweet thing to do. I don't know if Chris is on the call today. But this is a fantastic exercise. One of my clients, he contacted me only this week. He runs a garden maintenance business, garden design, garden maintenance, and he's aware of a luxury development locally, and he's very keen to get in there. So the new builds and so forth. So the gardens are really plain; they're just laid to lawn to begin with. So he's really keen to get in there and do some work for them. So he's put together a welcome basket, and he's been speaking with the sales director of the development, and so every time somebody new moves in, this basket is going to be sat in their kitchen, and it's got bread from the local bakery, there's a couple of bottles of beer from the local pub, you can see there his logo right in the middle is in a tea bag, and there's a mug from them. That the on the right here, the green leaves, you can see it's his logo, those are iced biscuits he's had specially made by a local sort of baker, and there's a pot of bulbs that they can put in the kitchen and what have you from the local florist. So it's a fantastic basket, done supremely well. So he's not skimped on it, he's done it incredibly well. Do we think he is much more likely to get traction from those people thinking, what a lovely gift, let's have a talk to these guys? I guarantee he's going to get a lot of business from this, and it's something he can repeat elsewhere. Another really interesting aspect of this idea of reciprocation is what's known as rejection and then retreat, or the power of the mutual concession. So I'll explain more about what I mean there. It's about sort of finding middle ground, essentially. And it comes from this sense that as social beings we are compelled to find common goals. Now, one of the most obvious ways in which this manifests itself is in negotiation. That we start at a high price, I want a low price, and we both concede a little bit and we find somewhere in the middle. You've come down by an amount, I feel obliged to match that gift with a concession of my own. So incredibly powerful. It works really well. We often see sort of the sort of bronze, silver and gold packages that people will sell, and we might think the gold is massively more expensive than they want to pay, so we concede and we come down to the silver. So if the salesman pitches off with the gold and how great it's going to be and all the knobs and dials, and then pitches the lower version as something more affordable, that's the mutual concession, and that we will meet there. So that's incredibly powerful, a way that you can use that in your business. And if you've ever doubted just how powerful this is, let me give you an example. I do hope everybody here on the call has heard of Watergate. And it's how they explain what happened at Watergate. So this guy on the left here, Gordon Liddy, and Nixon, for the youngsters on the call, just in case you don't know, it brought down the American government when Nixon authorised spies going into the Watergate building to spy against the opposition, and it was all a scheme put together by Gordon Liddy here on the left hand side. Now, looking back, it was incredibly risky, incredibly foolhardy, almost guaranteed to end in catastrophe, which of course it did, and it required them to spend $250,000, $250,000, and we're talking back in the in the 70s, wasn't it? Back in the 70s, that was a lot of money. How did anybody authorise that was a reasonable thing? Well, the reality was, that's where it started. His first plan was for $1 million, which was extreme. That's not possible. No. You need to come up with something more realistic. He came back with Plan B. That was going to cost $500,000. And finally, he came back with Plan C, which was $250,000. And that was the basis they went ahead on. And the general belief is that if it hadn't have happened in that order, Watergate would never have happened. It was only that it felt like the best option, that there was this sense of mutual concession, that the whole process went away. I mean, that's extraordinary, I think. That is how powerful this stuff can be. Another really good example, this is my best picture here of juvenile delinquents. I apologise that I wouldn't say they are the best example, but these are juvenile delinquents. They did an experiment with a bunch of, so they asked students, would they be prepared to take juvenile delinquents to the zoo for half a day for no money? slightly unmissable, perhaps. Only 7% people, surprisingly, agreed to doing that. However, when in their alternative version of this, they invited the same, or a bunch of people, would they spend 2 hours a week, unpaid again, every week for a year, working with juveniles? Well, nobody said yes to that. They then came back and pitched, okay then, how about taking to the zoo for the day? And 20% of people agreed. So 3 times as many people, when you have this sense of the retreat and repeat, the mutual concession, incredibly powerful. So in this sense, in your marketing, try proposing the bigger deal, then retreat, to the silver. So it's like having, say, the platinum and then going for your gold and silver options. Very, very powerful. You see the car sellers do this really well, starting with the car that's got all the knobs on and all, the top of the range, and then retreat to something that's much more affordable. You'll almost certainly find yourself ending up spending a lot more than you had intended. And the car industry can teach us a lot. They're very good at this stuff. So there we are. That is reciprocation. So it's interesting that that's the one most of you weren't using. I think it's really, really powerful. Just that thank you gift. I mean, how many of your clients would keep working with you if you sent them thank you gifts? Okay, we're going to crack on now. Commitment.
Just a couple of real quick points, actually.
Yeah.
Just they're very small. McDonald's toys with their food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then pens, charity pens coming through in envelope packages.
Exactly. That's a
Thanks
really,
to
really
those
good point.
people who suggested those.
Oh, thank you, Pete. Excellent, Nicola and Dave. Thank you for that. Absolutely, the pens that they sent, because you're much more likely to donate if someone has given you a gift. It's very powerful. Okay, commitment and consistency. What does this mean? It's all about I'm compelled to be consistent in the way I behave. Wonderful picture this. Does your local gym like? I promise, nobody in this room is in that photograph. But people who join the gym, you will find their behaviour will change to become more consistent with being a fit person. And it's largely to do with their image of themselves of being a fit person. They'll suddenly be talking about going to the gym, talking about healthy foods more. They may not get any fitter, I'll grant you, but that they will change their behaviour to be more consistent because they now see themselves as a gym going person. So lots of their other behaviours will change. Some of you out there who are golfers, this is my husband all over. There's don't think there's a Callaway golf club he hasn't bought. And he will change his behaviours. He will start talking up his game and talking about clubs he wants to go and play at, because he needs to change his behaviour to justify his decision, because he is a serious golfer, because serious golfers spend an awful lot of money on Callaway clubs. So his behaviour will change to justify why he spent several £100 on a club, which largely he had already, but this one's got a few more tweaks and changes on it. So his behaviour will change to justify a decision. It's explained by this sense that it's a shortcut for us. It filters out stress. If every decision we made we had to think through from scratch, we would go into complete stress and overload. And that manifests itself kind of in marketing terms really powerful, is I've made a decision, so other decisions I make will be consistent with it. It's really easy. Great experiment he showed in the book. They set up a guy, he did it on 2 lots of 20 occasions, so they've repeated this experiment 40 times. He goes and sunbathes on a beach relatively close, 5 or 6 feet from somebody, and he has a radio with him. After half an hour or so, he disappears off and goes for a swim, and so the radio is left untended by his stuff. So a burglar then, so a staged burglar, comes along and he picks up the radio and he runs off with it. Now in that case, 4 out of 20 times the neighbouring person challenged the burglar. So 1/5 of the times. Now in an alternative version of the experiment, the only simple change was before the guy goes off to have a swim, he says to the neighbour, would you mind looking after my things or keeping an eye on my things for me? And you'd say yes, wouldn't you? We've all been asked that on the beach. And in that case, exactly the same, the burglar comes along and he picks up the radio and runs off with it. And in that case, 19 out of 20, so just about everybody challenged the burglar. And when I say challenge, what we're talking about is people running down the beach, somebody made a citizen's arrest, somebody kind of rugby tackled the guy to the ground. So a really high level, again, disproportionate consistency, because I now see myself as a person who looks after other people's things. And that's really important to me. My behaviour needs to be consistent with that. In marketing terms, really powerful, this one. How many of you on the call are members of Amazon Prime? I know I am. So 10 million people worldwide belong to Amazon Prime. Basically, it costs £49 in the UK, $79 in the US for a whole year, and it means it covers all your delivery costs and so forth, but there's an upfront cost. You just do the math, as they say out there. That's a £500 million business. So on any level, that's a good starting point. But what they've done is research the buying behaviours of people who are Amazon Prime members versus people who aren't. And the average American who's a Prime member spends $1,224 a year on Amazon versus $505 if they're non-Prime. Now that's 2.5 times what people who don't belong to Prime are spending. And it's back to the people who are changing their behaviour to justify their decision to buy, to justify the investment that they made. And goodness me, isn't that powerful?
That's amazing.
It is amazing, isn't it? So how can I make that work in my marketing? Well, you know, this one's really simple, but I tell you, it's probably the one thing you guys could make all the difference with instantly. It's about making it really easy for them to spend money with you, about developing a buying habit. And it isn't that hard to do. And certainly when you're starting a relationship, get them to buy something. Buy the small thing, because once they've created that first habit and you continue to make it easy for them to buy, they will create a consistent habit. But it does require that you do a lot more of this. You've got to keep following up, and that's where so many people fall down, that you know, they're afraid to follow up, they're afraid to stay in touch, they're worried that people will get peed off because they're sending too many emails, and they don't follow up with their customers, and you are genuinely leaving money on the table. You need to keep thinking about new ways they can spend money with you, because if you do, they will. It's an absolute fact. There's an interesting alternative to that, which is kind of almost like a reverse of it. The idea that if you buy expensive can also build a habit. And again, they've done quite a lot of experiments with this, that if you go into a shop, and even if you've got perhaps a fixed amount of money to spend, if you buy a cheap suit, you are likely to buy cheap accessories to go with it. It's this consistency, I'm making consistent decisions. But if you are diverted by the salesman and he gets you to buy the expensive suit, the chances are you'll buy expensive accessories to go with it. Now, you might argue some of that's to do with affordability. People who can afford the expensive suit in the first place can afford the expensive accessories. But again, they've done experiments and it shows that people, you know, even if their financial means are the same, if they start with the expensive item, are much more likely to be consistent with the other things they buy with it. So, you know, it's really worth thinking this through. You know, apply it to your situation. What's the best way forward with this? But certainly follow up, make it easy for people to buy. So number 3 is social proof. So what's that one about? I'm likely to want to do what other people around me are doing. So we look for kind of approval, don't we, of the people around us, and want to copy that behaviour. Now, it's the basis behind canned laughter. Now, we all hate it, or even live audience, but they have shown consistently that programming is more rated highly if there is canned laughter. If we're getting that social proof, other people find it funny, we are much more likely to find it funny as well. You know, the buskers and the baristas know all about this. You know, how many buskers do you see? They've seeded this case with money in dollars, and you see this one, there's kind of £20 notes in there, so we're getting a clue here as to what level of tip we're looking for. Or, you know, the tip jar, just to show this is the behaviour we're expecting you to do. Other people have done it. Incredibly powerful. Now this one is a cracker, and I thought hard about whether or not we should actually include this. Now again, some of you won't remember this incident, going back into the 1960s, known as the Jonestown Massacre. And these, I have to tell you, are dead bodies. These are the aerial photos, because in the Jonestown Massacre, 3,500 people died in a mass suicide. And you know, there's been lots of research and investigation of how it happened. It was a cult-based thing. Mostly people did it because everybody else was doing it. The social proof was this was the right thing to do. And I just do think that's extraordinary, isn't it? If you can get people to kill themselves because of the social proof. We're going to come on to authority. There's clearly a large piece of authority working on here as well. But even when you're questioning, is this a good idea? And you're looking around and clearly everybody else is going along with it. Really, really powerful. Which does make this next question a slightly more difficult one to answer. How can I make that work in my marketing? I do not suggest mass suicide is a great thing to try and employ in your marketing.
Unless you're a funeral director.
Well, indeed, that could work, couldn't it? But this sense that it's just so powerful what other people think. And I tell you, the most obvious way in which you can make use of this is with the testimonial. And it's the thing, I can't tell you how many times people say, oh, it's all a bit difficult, particularly if you've got perhaps a more technical service or you're a consultancy sale and there's issues of confidentiality and you've got to go back to the client and get their approval. Yes, it's all a bit difficult. And, oh, we don't like to use their name, or my clients would never allow us to use a photograph. But, you know, that's a really strong testimonial. I believe it because it's proper, it's got a photograph, it's got emotional language in it. I'm relating to it. And that's the whole point. Proper testimonials are super powerful because people are much more likely to do what other people endorse. And, you know, just never, ever, ever underestimate the value of doing testimonials properly. Again, one of the single things you could make a difference instantly would be to look at how you're using testimonials. Are they on the front page of your website, not hidden in what clients say, right up there on the front page? Really, really important. You know, social proof, it's why Twitter works. You know, we're seeing what other people are saying, seeing what other people are doing. You know, why it's so important, what's trending on Twitter. YouTube, how many likes. I mean, many people here would have seen the Dollar Shave Club, and it's now got, I think, 12 million views or what have you. And so, you know, we think it's a good thing because 12 million other people have looked at it. You know, Facebook, absolute phenomenon. And there'll be a lot of particularly older people saying, oh, I don't get on with Facebook, I don't understand it. Well, you have to understand it because it's powerful and it's a massive opportunity for social proofing. And of course, there's massive other social media that you can use. Recommendation. You know, so how many people, there's been some people on Tuesday who said over 50% of their business came through personal recommendation. Just incredibly powerful stuff that, you know, that somebody I know does, is approving, is telling me that I should make this decision. And again, we're going to come on to this next section called liking, which connects with this one as well. But personal recommendation is really, really powerful for you. So again, don't underestimate it. Number 4, liking. All things being equal, I'm much more likely to do business with friends. All things being not quite so equal, I'm still much more likely to do business with friends. It's just a fact of life. And the guys at Tupperware understand this incredibly well. What a wonderful picture, isn't it? Would you just love to have a party with these ladies? But in Tupperware, and again, they've done quite a lot of research on what they've established here, is the strength of the social bond is 2 times as important as liking for the product. So what we've got here is the hostess. So the Tupperware organiser gets the hostess to run a party, and it's trading on the relationship her friends have with her, the attraction, the warmth, the obligation, and the liking they have from her is massively more important even than the liking for the product. I mean, a lot of you out here will recognise the fact you actually actively avoid going to these parties because you know you're going to spend. It's even if you've got more Tupperware than you know what to do with, you still come away with 3 more boxes. Or 3 more sets of underpants or whatever, depending what kind of party it is. But that's why the whole party plan concept works so brilliantly, because it trades on the fact that we all like each other. I talked about the car industry earlier. How many car salesmen in checking over your car just to see the value of it for your trade-in spots you've got golf clubs in the back of your car, and you'll find yourself chatting to him in the showroom about how he plays golf as well and what club do you play at, and this sense of affinity that this is somebody who's like me, that becomes my friend, that does the same kinds of things I do. So the car industry does this incredibly well. It's the basis for celebrity endorsement. I mean, why do we love, you know, the guy from Meerkat? Although I know many people may not. Spencer, you're not a great fan of the Meerkats, are you? But you know, how cute is that little tiny baby one they've got in there now? I'm an absolute sucker for it. It's been, you know, an absolute phenomenon. And interestingly, Michael Winner, they used him. I can't even think who did the Michael Winner ones. Can't remember the name of the insurers, but that almost traded on the fact a lot of people found it incredibly annoying and didn't like it. But that, of course, had its own effect, didn't it? And now we've got people like Michael Parkinson. There's Esther Rancer doing it, and June Whitfield in the, you know, over 50 plan, because we like these people. You know, we've all seen, you know, Gary Lineker and the Chris, because he's, you know, he's got one of the cutest guys. Everybody likes Gary Lineker. You know, particularly little boys who play football and what have you. It's been a phenomenon for walkers. I don't know, ladies. Why does this stuff work? That's Emporio Armani. I promise you that is an advert at the bottom there. It was not just a gratuitous picture of David Beckham.
It's just your screensaver.
You've caught me out there. But, you know, incredibly powerful. I mean, look at this endorsement here on the top right with Pepsi. Really, really powerful stuff. It absolutely works. So how can I make that work in my marketing? David Beckham doesn't come cheap, so maybe that's not going to be the route for you. But things like, you know, creating this sense of people like us. I mean, one of my clients runs a kitchens business, and she knows that her customers are kind of people like her. So that sense of people like us, as letting people know that we're on the same wavelength, we're going to be able to do business together. And the way you use your photos, the language you use will all reinforce that. So using pictures of you on your website and in your marketing, using video, because I can start to get to know you. I start to feel like you're an okay person. I feel I can trust you. It's, you know, my new website being launched. There's a picture of me. I'm talking to them. It's an autoplay. It's important stuff, and it works. So how can you use this stuff? Learn it from the car salesman, first of all. They're good at this stuff. Get customers to make referrals for you, because people will like them, that they will go along with it because it's come recommended from a friend of theirs. And don't just get an email address, get them to make a proper introduction. It gets massively more powerful the more connection is. So if you can arrange for them to set up a lunch where they are present, that's kind of the pinnacle of the referral, whereas an email address, there's kind of no affinity at all. So that you need to get this sense of getting them involved, because that's the part that's really going to change people's behaviour. Being friendly, you know, people are much more likely to like you if you're friendly to them. So it's just simple saying thank you, which brings us back to things like the thank you cards. People will like you more, much more likely to do business with you. So 3 really easy ways in which you can introduce that. Okay, number 5, authority. We're pack animals. You know, we look for a pack leader. So essentially, authorities are all about doing it because the bloke in the posh suit said you should. And you know, and we're all victims to that. Again, Cialdini did experiments showing in America people were massively more likely to jaywalk, so cross the road illegally, following a guy in a suit, than they were to follow a hippie. Just why is that? Because, I mean, he obviously looks a bit down on his luck, so he couldn't be possibly doing it right. But the guy's wearing a suit. I'm prepared to risk being illegal because he's doing it as well. The experiment I want to tell you about here is extraordinary. It was known as the Milgram study. Obviously, a guy called Milgram that did it. I'm hoping it wasn't quite the mad professor that we've got here. But essentially, they invited pairs of people into an experiment at a university. One of them was the learner, and one was the teacher. Now, the teacher was essentially became the professor's or the research leader's assistant, so that they were on one side with the researcher and the learner was on the other side. They were invited to memorise, the learner was invited to memorise pairs of words that kind of went together. So they were given a list, given some time to memorise them, and then it was revealed. So they were then taken off and strapped into a chair, and this is a picture of the actual thing, strapped into a chair with electrodes, and it was made clear. So they were going to be given one of the words, and they had to repeat back what the second word was. And every time they got it wrong, there would be a small electric shock. So you're beginning to think now, goodness me, maybe I should have offered to be the other guy. However, but they were reassured because there was in fact going to be no permanent tissue damage. I'm not sure how reassured I would have felt at that point, but there you are. However, so that it progresses, and the teacher is asking the question of the first of the words, and every time the guy gets it wrong, a small electric shock, and it starts off at 15 volts, and every time they get it wrong, it goes up by 15. So really sort of minor at the begin with, 15, 30, then 45 volts. But as we go on, it starts to get a bit more serious, and of course you're starting to get electric shocks. It impairs your ability to think, and you're getting a bit panicky perhaps, so you make more mistakes, and so it starts to escalate away. So, you know, not getting quite so comfortable. Hey, you know, we're getting serious now. 270, 285, 300 volts were being put through these people. In fact, it went up to 450 volts. And even at the point where people were screaming, the teacher continued to pull the switches. So 2/3 of the people in this experiment pulled all 30 of the switches, regardless of what was being said to them. Now I'm going to read out a little bit from the book here, because honestly he says it's so much better than I could, but it is really extraordinary and very, very powerful. So it says here, rather than yield to the pleas of the victim, about 2/3 of the subjects in Milgram's experiment pulled every one of the 30 shock switches in front of them and continued to engage the last switch at 450 volts until the researcher ended the experiment. More alarming still, not one of the 40 subjects in his study quit his job as teacher when the victim first began to demand his release, nor later when he began to beg for it, nor even later when his reaction to each shock had become, in Milgram's words, definitely an agonised scream. Not until the 300-volt shock had been sent and the victim had shouted in desperation that he would no longer provide answers to the memory test did anyone stop, and even then it was a small minority who did. They then went on to say perhaps they didn't realise how painful it was, and in some of the experiments they told them this guy had a heart problem. So that's it, oh, get me out of here, I told you I had heart trouble, my heart's starting to bother me, I refuse to go on, let me out. The results were the same as before. 65% of the subjects carried out their duties faithfully to the maximum shock. Now, you may have started to, I mean, this sounds really scary, but the point being here, in actual fact, the learner, the guy with the electric shocks, was in fact an actor. There were no electric shocks. But of course, the teacher didn't know that. So actually, no people were killed on the basis of this experiment. So the actual research was being done on the person who was assisting the researcher. And absolutely extraordinary the levels that people would go to. And again, he says here, it has to do with a deep-seated sense of duty to authority within us all. According to Milgram, the real culprit of the experiment was his subject's inability to defy the wishes of the boss of the study, the lab-coated researcher who urged, and if needed be, directed the subjects to perform their duties, despite the emotional and physical mayhem they were causing. I just think that's amazing. Isn't that extraordinary? Yeah. I mean, well, who can imagine? It was back in the 60s. Maybe, you know, we're a bit more savvy now. I don't know.
Stuart Morrison has just sent a link to the original study on the website, so I've shared it with everyone.
Yeah, so do have a look at it. I'm not making this stuff. In fact, you couldn't make some of this stuff up. So the question again, how can I make that work in my marketing? Well, so maybe we won't do some of that stuff, but what I'm trying to tell you is just how powerful it is. That the guy in the white coat, the bloke in the suit, suddenly becomes all-powerful. So how can you use it? Well, becoming an authority in your sector, and that's a lot about leadership behaviour, just sort of, you know, assuming authority and acting in an authoritative manner. You know, and one of those things, appearing in the press and PR. If you get yourself on TV, on local radio, in magazines, people will perceive you as a leader in your sector. It's congruent behaviour with being a leader. Becoming a business speaker, when you cross that dotted line to the front of the room, you've suddenly become an authority figure. You know, anybody that's written a book, it's really powerful this, that you're a published author or a published expert in your sector, then people will perceive you as an authority, take you a lot more seriously. And of course the power of social media, that's how, you know, you've got the whole social proofing adding to it, but that's how we can let people know that we are an authority. And the way you comment on other people's tweets, you know, you can comment in an authoritative manner, that you are the go-to person for advice. Really, really powerful. So act like a leader, be congruent, and people will follow you. And I think that's incredible stuff. And all of you can do some of that. You know, some of you may feel you don't want to be a business speaker, and I understand that. But you know, everyone can write a book, even if it's only a short ebook. You know, position it as a book. It can make all the difference. So our final tool, or weapon, as he puts it, scarcity. If I can't have it, suddenly I want it all the more. And you can imagine this going back tens of thousands of years, you know, when food is scarce, when survival depends on our response to scarcity, is where that comes from, very deep-seated and hardwired in us. It was clearly very deep-seated and hardwired in my mum, I have to tell you. She could not walk past a sale sign. I'm an Essex girl. I was brought up in Essex, and we used to go to Romford Market. My mum, and a bargain, if she thought there wasn't much left on the stall, she was there like the proverbial rat up a drain pipe. It's really powerful stuff. And you know, we've seen these kind of sites, haven't we, in sales on the news, where people absolute mayhem when people think the stuff is running out. Cialdini explains it with what he describes as psychological reaction theory, and to explain that. So basically, when our freedoms are threatened, our desire to reassert control is overwhelming. We need to kind of rebalance things, and the way we do that is that we want the thing masses more than before. So our desire to receive that thing and to get ourselves back into balance becomes really overwhelming. An interesting experiment that he did here involving biscuits, in fact. What they got people to do was to rate biscuits. They got them to sample biscuits, so they gave them a jar of biscuits and they got them to rate them, and so you know, it got rated at a level. For another bunch of people, they gave them a plate with 2 biscuits on, and they got the same biscuits, and they got them to rate those, and consistently the rates were higher. The average rates were higher. When there were less, people rated them more. But interesting, in the variation of this, they started off with, so they showed people, here are the biscuits, we're going to ask you to rate these, but these aren't the ones you're going to rate. They then handed them a plate with 2 biscuits on and took the jar away. And consistently, that's where they got the highest ratings. So where we get this sense of diminishing scarcity, we saw that there were 10, and now there's only 2. We can see them disappearing before our eyes. That the impact on the emotional impact is massively more powerful. I think that's just interesting. We can see that power working when we're talking about biscuits. Just imagine if you deploy this smartly in your marketing. So how can I make that work in my marketing? Well, that's not difficult, actually. Use short deadlines would be a starting point. Any of you that sell via email or online or what have you, give people deadlines to work to. Give them a reason to take action. Now, there will be a time this is no longer available. Use scarcity. There are only 100 of these available, in fact. So, you know, if you want one, you need to act quickly. Very, very powerful. Anybody in the direct market will understand that. Show them that supply is running out. There are only 10 slots. Oh, you know, and they're going down. There's only 3 of those left. You know, report if you've only got a number of slots. There are only a few left. That the diminishing supply. That the price will go up after X amount of days. Again, that works really, really powerfully. So there we are. It's been a bit of a race through today, so I hope it's given you some good stuff. So let's just do some summary. So I've got a really good case study coming up, something local and something real that you're gonna be able to see how this stuff works. So let's just summarise then. So what have we got here? Reciprocation, that whole business about giving and receiving, the mutual concession, commitment and consistency, getting people to create habits, social proof, getting testimonials going. You know, liking that we talked about, making sure people like you, put your photos out there, getting affinity, becoming a leader with authority, and having this sort of diminishing supply with scarcity. So we are going to run poll 2, so I'd be interested, again, I can only offer you 5 things, so I've put 5 items out there. Just you tell me whether you think some of these things are going to work. So can you...
It is open.
Oh, it's open. So tell me, given what we've said today, which of you are likely to perhaps consider doing business speaking now or publishing your book? Are you going to really focus on testimonials? Are you going to look at maybe doing thank you gifts? Using the sense of the premium packages that people have got a choice, or maybe bringing deadlines in? So we're getting some good responses there. So let's give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you can close that now, Spencer, and share the results. Oh, so that's really good to see. So majoring on testimonials, because that, you know, that is really an absolute no-brainer, isn't it? We should do that. Good to see publishing a book is well up there. On business speaking, you should do that. Bringing in deadlines. So thank you gifts is the one that least people have gone for. But you know, how difficult could that be to blow away relatively quickly? Or a thank you card. I think you could do that. So, you know, those are some really simple ideas. But, you know, I do know how these webinars are. There's loads of information we've gone through today. And you may well be sitting there now thinking, how do I properly implement that in my marketing? And it is important that you do. I said at the beginning, you don't want to be sort of frivolous and you know, scant about this by just paying lip service. It's about really thinking it through. How can I do that in my marketing? And of course, it's always so much easier to suggest how somebody else might do it than it is to look at our own stuff. I said at the beginning, I had something for you. So before I get into the case study, I know some of you will want to rush off, so I'm just going to put this idea to you. I said at the beginning, I had a bit of a gift for you. I really do want to help you with this, and I can help a number of you who are really serious about your marketing. I'll be really happy to do that for you. The best way I'm going to be able to help you is in a one-to-one call, because I can find out about what you do and really come up with some ideas and brainstorm with you, and I'm happy to do that, but I can't do it for everybody. You'll appreciate that. So there are 10 calls I'm going to make available if people want to connect up with me, and we're going to do a 30-minute one-to-one call. So this is just all about you. They're going to be available over the next few days. We've got 10 slots. We've got 4 tomorrow,
3 Tuesday and 3 Wednesday.
3 on Wednesday, yes. So we've got them over 3 days in the. So this isn't sometime in the future. We're talking about taking some rapid action here. But I do need to charge you, because I can't do this for free, because I need to talk to serious people, and people who are serious I know will make the decision and commit to buying that. Let me help you to understand the context of that. The gift is it's only 20% of what I usually charge. I charge quite a lot more per hour. For 10 of you today, I can do that for you for £29, because I want to talk to people who are serious about implementing, who are prepared to make a decision to move forward, because I think we can come up with some really exciting stuff for you. So if that interests you, all you have to do now is go to www.ontrack-offer.co.uk, and it's available there. It is only £29. Like I say, it's 20% of what it would normally cost. There are only 10 available. Spencer, do you see what I did there? There's a little bit of scarcity going on there.
In fact, somebody's just said, okay, it works. I have the scarcity book. Yes, please.
Okay, so do get on there. We are going to close it probably by the end of tomorrow, come what may. But do go on to that if that's of interest to you. I would really love to help you. The stuff I love doing best is getting stuck in, and I can do that with you on a call. We'll get some information from you beforehand, so we don't spend all the call talking about what you do. We'll have found that out beforehand. So I hope some of you will take me up on that. So let's quickly go back. Where were we? I was talking about a case study. Many of you that have come to my events will have seen this case study. It's a guy who runs Will Baker. He runs a garage down Lisson, Hampshire. He's an ordinary guy running an ordinary little business. You know, he doesn't have Amazon's budgets. He doesn't have huge amounts that he can apply to his marketing. And I just want to show just how clever he is being by doing the things he's doing. He offers MOTs for £15 to new customers. He wants to get them in. He's up against the big garages, and he wants them to come in and try his garage out and to trust him. It's a fabulous little garage. So how's he doing that? Well, first of all, you know, what he's doing, he's trying to create a consistent behaviour. He's trying to get people to make a buying decision with him. He's making it really easy for them, because he knows once they've made a decision once, they are massively more likely to return. So that's really smart thinking. He's added some scarcity in there, and there's only 100 available. And he did split this with some that had deadline and some that had a limited number. And in actual fact, he got equal results with both. But that's something you would need to test and find out what works best for you. So there's only 100 available. You know, we tend to like him. He's a nice guy. He's a smiley face. He's you know, clean cut, and people like us. He's not some sort of sleazebag of a mechanic in grubby overalls. You know, we tend to like him because how he's presenting himself on there.
And it's consistent as well, because he looks like that in real life. So when you meet him,
yeah, exactly. It's an absolute congruency. This isn't a stock photo. That is real Will sat there. If you look here in the why we do it, you know, he's talking about building trust, and it's important that to him. So again, we tend to like him because he's being really honest and open with us. Authority. I wondered about this. Is he showing authority? I think he is, because if you see the piece, it's incredible quality. There's no sort of greengrocer's apostrophes. It's all spelt properly. It's on good quality paper. It's been done properly. You know, I tend to think this is being done by a proper garage, not again some sort of scaggy garage at the back of an industrial estate. He's positioning himself as a leader rather than as a follower. So I think that works really well. When you go to the second page here, he has a testimonial on this. It's quite a fulsome testimonial. We've got a picture of the guy in his car. But equally, this whole sense of liking, he's a Lotus driver. Will is after Range Rovers, BMs, Audis, you know, the 3 or 4 year old decent cars. So he's showing it's people like us, that it's somebody similar to you that has given this testimonial. I'm not sure about the reciprocation thing, but he has on the second side here, he's doing a prize there. So I think there's an element of that. Probably the reciprocation element's the bit that's weakest on this, but not every item has to have everything going on. But there may be a bit of reciprocation going on there. And again, we like him. Another nice picture of him, clean cut and a nice little speech bubble. He kind of looks quite cute, and we tend to want to sort of go along with it. And I know this has been amazingly powerful for him. Let's be quite clear here. This has been phenomenally powerful for him. And if you follow this as a template, you won't go far wrong.
Actually, talking of reciprocation, that is kind of on there, but that comes more through with what he does. Extras wise, thank you, gifts, notes in the car.
Yeah, you're absolutely right
there. It doesn't have to all be on one, does it? It's the whole package.
You're quite right there, because one of the things we know is, I mean, just as an example, I had a wonderful experience in a car park in Guildford recently, where I managed to drive out the car park before the ramp had been lowered, and it took out the bottom of my car. I can't explain why I did that. I wasn't thinking and not looking. Anyway, £1,000 worth of damage later, but Will and his guys put it right for me, but then they got it back within a couple of days. Fabulous service. And sitting on the passenger seat next to me was a flower wrapped in cellophane with a little card from the guy who'd finished the car off, just as a, you know, thank you for your business. You know, and they do that for all their lady customers. It's hard not to feel, you know, some element of obligation and reciprocation. Very hard not to like. And just the way they do stuff, they use testimonials really, really powerfully. You go in their showroom, they've got a giant sort of plasma screen with lovely pictures of people and really fulsome testimonials. So it's not, as Spencer says, not just about this one piece, it's the whole package. And I wanted to show you this to say, because it's normal and it's local and it's an ordinary guy doing it without, you know, big budgets. It's powerful stuff. So there we are, we have just hit the hour. So just to remind you, if you want to take up my offer, go to ontrack-offer.co.uk to do those calls. Have you had anybody buy through? I think we've had a couple come through already. So there we are, but a diminishing scarcity there. So if you want to get one of those calls, please do sign up, and I really, really look forward to seeing how we can get this stuff working powerfully in your business. So more webinars coming up. We love we're going to do lots more this year. Powerful PR. Some of you will know Lucy. She may even be on the call today. We're going to be talking with her. Veronica Pullen. My goodness, she's the queen of social media. She's so funny. Thanks so much for coming along and don't forget that offer. So until the next one, thank you so much, guys. I really hope that's been useful. So cheerio. Bye bye.